Hi everyone, welcome to this BIM 360 surgery, a specific surgery that is focusing more around the BIM 360 early access program that Autodesk has introduced, and also looking at what happens thereafter, plus what happens if you deploy BIM 360 as this extended trial, but also looking at what happens to other workflows that could potentially be supported by BIM 360. So welcome to the session. My name is Carl Spalding. I am the Head of Portfolio Management at Excitec, and really just going to spend this time trying to talk to you around some of the things you should be thinking about with BIM 360 if you are deploying this extended access program, or if you already have it and you're looking to get more out of the solution. Just a quick note, this is a live session. It is going to be recorded, so you'll be able to access it afterwards. But if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask, please use the chat. There are instructions around how to use the chat, excuse me, and any questions that you raise, I'll try and answer those for you around BIM 360 or around this extended access program. So what I'm going to do is I quickly kind of threw some stuff together on a presentation because I thought that would kind of really help to kind of highlight some of the benefits that BIM 360 can offer beyond the extended access program. So many customers are kind of deployed BIM 360 and essentially using it as a storage, somewhere where they can put all their project data to make it accessible to their design teams or to other people to interact with. And that's pretty much as far as they've gone. So they've started the trial, extended access trial, that is, which means that it expires at the end of May, and essentially added people to it, added some project folders, and then set some permissions, and now people can access that data. And if you're Revit work sharing, that's a great start because you can now collaborate in that space. And that basically means that your project model, rather than it being on the server, is sitting in the cloud, and the kind of mechanism behind the work sharing is enabled and supported. So that's kind of as far as it's gone. I want to show you what BIM 360 can do beyond that. I'll touch on some of that, but I also want you to kind of consider some of the workflows beyond that. So I'll just move this presentation along slightly. So I'm going to talk around what BIM 360 is and how it operates, how it works, how it functions, and what you can get from it. So you can see, perhaps, get an idea of the scale of BIM 360, and then you can decide how you want to use it. If you want to continue just to use it as a storage, that's fine, but at least you'll be informed in terms of what it's possible to achieve with BIM 360. So the extended access program is really looking at just the project data, which is this big blue line that you can see above the Autodesk Forge. And there are some analytics and insights around that, but also it's looking at design. So that's your co-authoring and collaboration. So there's only two elements. There's a whole, kind of big area of BIM 360 that's not available on the extended access program. So it's the only two programs you've got is BIM 360 Docs and BIM 360 Design. So if you look at BIM 360 as a holistic entity, it enables a lot of different kind of capabilities and functionality, from data analytics, document management, and design, which is the extended access program. There's also a whole other areas, a whole number of other areas that BIM 360 starts to manage, from coordination, RFIs, to quality management, meeting notes, and so on. So really, just behind those, what we're looking at is just that top segment. So it's really document management, design collaboration, and then some of the data and analytics that go with that. So looking at that in a kind of slightly different way of now looking at kind of the functionality rather than the rest of it, what we're looking at is this. It's the document management, that big band you see across the screen there. From the storage and access control, that's predominantly what majority of people are using it for, to store data. But there's a number of other things which I want to talk to you around, which is your collaboration and communication, model viewing, both mobile and desktop, basically from a browser. Then there's some other things, issue management, versioning. It's not revision, but I'll talk to that. There's approvals, workflows, there's transmittals, document sets, and even reporting. And that's just looking at, that's what's available to you. And I want to kind of encourage you to start to explore what some of these options are, because it's going to make a difference to your ability to deliver projects remotely. So, like I said, threw this together. So there's apologies for the kind of crude storyline, but hopefully it'll make sense. So right now, or kind of pre-COVID, we have a situation where we were work sharing from an office, and we had multiple people work sharing in that environment. We also had individuals who just had they're either working on Revit and AutoCAD, and those projects were saved on the server. So the little blue kind of database there represents your server. So whether you were work sharing from your office or multiple offices, you're all connected to your server, in a work shared environment, or from a Revit AutoCAD with your project saved on the server. So that's fine. You also had people that were interacting with that data because they knew where it was and how to interact with it, either to review it, review any progress, or approve any documentation that needed to be approved, and so on. And you potentially also had people working from home, or working remotely, which were accessing that project data from your server as well, and they would have been given access to do that. Well, what's happened now is we've got everyone's working from home, essentially. So, trying to access that data on a server starts to throw up some obstacles. Firstly, if you're a Revit user, and you want to access a Revit model, and you're either connecting via a VPN to your server, you're going to get some kind of latency issues with that, depending on the size of your model. If you're remote controlling a machine that's in the office, again, there's some issues with that, in terms of you're now using your desktop machine, which may or may not have the security protocols that are supported by your company, but you're accessing through a VPN or through a remote desktop to control a machine that's accessing data that's on the server. But that's okay. That's one way of doing it. And when you start to look at the broader picture of that, you start to think about how other people can interact with that data. So the bigger the project files, or the quantity, it starts to become a bit of a challenge in terms of accessing, controlling, just working in that way. I appreciate we have the same situation in our organization, where some people are working from the kitchen, some are working from their bedroom, some are working. We don't have an ideal single office. I've been working from home for a long time, so I am set up, but a lot of people aren't, because this has been thrust into the situation. So we've got we have to be very sensitive to the fact that adding an additional kind of bottleneck in terms of connecting to a server may just make it a little bit frustrating to access some of this data, and certainly a remote desktop to use Revit, without some of the lagging that may occur, is not always as effective as we would like. So what happens then is, in my head, I'm saying, well, how do I kind of not tether all of my staff to my server? Is there a way that we can liberate that, and not have to have all those security protocols, have to rely on basically the internet speed at the home user end, as well as the internet speed at the office, and with multiple people accessing that? And the biggest challenge we're seeing at the moment with the multiple people accessing from home is the throttling that's occurring kind of at the suburb side by some of the internet providers. So What happens then if we just go, look, let's put BIM 360 here, remove the server option, and just put our project data in BIM 360? What does that start to enable beyond the obvious, which I'm going to talk to first? So the first thing is that we've got the ability in BIM 360 to view and, let's go with view, to view around 60 different CAD file formats. So that means that I can use either a mobile device or any internet browser to log into BIM 360 and view all this project data. I can view Revit files, Revit models, Revit sheets, Inventor files. I can view IFC models, PDFs, documents, PowerPoints, Excel spreadsheets. I can view all of this data just from a browser. I don't need any specific desktop software to be able to do that. I just simply log into a browser. Nothing to download, nothing to install. Once I'm signed in, if I have access to that data in BIM 360, I can view it. So I'm viewing native 2D and 3D file formats. I'm going to talk to why that's so important as we go through this. Remember, if you've got any questions, please drop them in the chat. So here's a big one for you. There's nothing to install. So there's no setup, there's no virus software or VPN software or anything like that that's required. Which means that once you enable your staff by adding them into BIM 360 as an individual using their email address, you set the permissions. They can pretty much just log in and away you go. So there's no big setting up securities and permissions and domains, and we don't need to do that. We can just do that in the environment, add people, and away we go. So there's no IT equipment, nothing that's required at that point. Very interesting is there's no storage limit. So what happens if you've got a project that's huge and you've got things like, I don't know, site surveys or cloud point data, that sort of stuff, and they're big files? Again, no limit. You can add all that data to this environment, and it's shared. That work sharing environment is enabled in terms of being able to share that data with other people. One of the key things that happens, to understand, if I load a document, even if I drag and drop it into BIM 360 into a folder, I work on that. Let's say it's a PDF, and then I update it and I save it again, and then I drag and drop that into that folder. What happens is BIM 360 sees that as a new version of the same file, so it'll call it version 2. And basically hide version 1. So your backups are happening automatically every time you update a file. So that's quite a key thing. The other thing that's really, really important is right now, if you're still tethering your staff to your server, you still have to think about backing up that data. And if you're backing up the data daily, weekly, monthly, whatever your cycle is, I'm aware most of our clients have, or had, people are trying to move this to a cloud, but you have to manage getting that data off-site just to secure it. Well, what happens with BIM 360 is all that data is automatically backed up anyway, so you can access that data from anywhere, but also you can access all the history of that data as projects move on and those files are updated. You still get a full kind of version history. And I'll talk a bit about that as well. So you've got unlimited storage and your backups are being taken care of automatically. It's available pretty much 24/7 and can be accessed from anywhere. You just sign in through a browser or through your mobile device. So you've got, I'll talk about the work sharing because that's very specific, and a lot of people are having to do that where you're co-authoring a Revit file. But I'll also talk around, some of the other access just to project files without necessarily co-authoring that with other users. But it's available 24/7, so you can kind of set that. Your working criteria around that, but there's no restrictions in terms of being able to access that data. So The reason we want to share data is, or at least have your project in a central location, is that other people can interact with that, whether they're doing things like marking up files for someone to check, or to correct certain design elements, whether that's 2D, 3D, PDF, Revit sheet, you name it. You can use BIM 360 as a platform to interact with the data that's being shared, whether that's a work in progress. So you may have your design teams working in a work in progress environment, and when they're ready, they publish that data to somewhere. Let's say it's step one, which is published for your document administrators to have a look at. They may check things like file naming or project data before it goes to anyone else. And that's where your approval workflow can come in, where that goes to your project administrator. They just log into BIM 360, that they see the data that's being shared, and they can pass that back to the originator if there's something wrong with it at that point, by using something like a markup or raising an issue. But you've got full redlining tools, markup. Multiple people can mark up a single document at the same time. So what does that mean? Usually what happens is, if we're in Revit and we need to publish some sheets, what we'll do is we'll save those to a PDF. So we'll export all of those sheets to a PDF, give them a name, put them in a location, and then we will share that with someone. WeTransfer, Dropbox, Google, whatever you want. Even BIM 360 will drag and drop them into BIM 360. And all of those files, or if they're small enough, we'll attach them to an email. But every time you do that, you're creating a duplicate of the file of what you're sharing. So if you've got a Revit sheet, you've already now created a duplicate of that sheet. And if you email that to 10 people, potentially you end up with 10 versions of that file. So if those 5 of those people mark it up and send it back to you, you're just creating more and more and more duplicates of the same file that needs to be managed. Well, what happens in BIM 360 is that I can share the sheets that I want to share as RVT files, share those sheets. People can mark up those sheets, raise issues, and it's still the single sheet that's been shared. So BIM 360 is managing the workflow around markups. It's enabling you to view, measure, interact with 2D and 3D data, to start to even drill down into the metadata associated with certain objects. But all of the comments and markups are available in that one platform. So there's no need to manage multiple data files and so on elsewhere, or manage multiple PDFs. So really good option. Something to consider is that, because you can do all the markups in here, you do not need to produce a PDF. You do not need to share PDFs, and you do not need to kind of get those marked up and sent back to you and manage it that way. You can do it simply from this environment. Going alongside that is issues. So if there is something that needs to be resolved and you do need to raise it as an issue and assign it to a company, an individual, or a particular kind of role, might be the project manager, for example, then you can just drag a pin, drop it on either the 2D or 3D. We're looking at the 3D space, yeah. Drop a pin in there, and you can then say, look, this is the issue. Type in some information. You can assign that to an individual or to a person or to a company, as I said, and then that gets tracked in BIM 360. So if you're assigning an issue to me, for example, you can have a date and when that needs to be resolved. Just fill in that little panel, and then I'll get a notification. I have to do something with it. When I click on that little link, I get access to this issue, and I can then look at that, make the necessary course of action to resolve that, or respond and answer any questions. And that is all managed inside BIM 360. And the advantage of doing it that way is that you can start to get some insights on what type of issues were raised, who raised the most issues, what issues were raised on what type of category. For example, it might be to do with the structural model, or it might be to do with the facade or the layout. But you'll start to get some insights as to some of the stuff that's being raised. So issue management is a really big part of what BIM 360 does, and it just stops that kind of waiting for information to come from other people when you're asking questions. It can all be tracked in real time in this environment. This is huge for me. How often do you receive a model from someone and you go, right, what's changed? You look through all the notes, you look through the history, and you go, okay, great. 2 hours later, you go, well, hang on a second, this is not right, and it just got missed in terms of sharing that information and tracking that change. Or what BIM 360 enables you to do is either in 2D or in 3D, and that's using a Revit file, an AutoCAD file, or an IFC, is you've got change visualization, which means that I can receive a model from a client, and I can compare that to the model they sent me 2 weeks ago, and visually see what's been added, what's been deleted, what's been modified. I can filter that down to those elements, and if you have a look at the screen here, you'll see that those are color-coded. So red is deleted, yellowy orange color, depending on your screen, is what's been modified, and green is all new. So it allows you to really interact with and visually see what's been changed in the model. You can filter those down. There's trees. There's lots of stuff that you can do to filter that data. But one of the really important things is if I've got a fire door, for example, or a door, and I've got a fire rating in that door, and I change the fire rating of the door, but do not modify any of its geometric properties, that will also get picked up in BIM 360 as having its data modified. That's very, very powerful. But equally, if you have a look on the right-hand side of that little screen there, you'll see that there's also a PDF, and we can see what's changed between a PDF because they're color-coded. You can see the red and the blue. That's like an overlay showing you what's changed between the two versions that have been issued. Just making it really easy for design teams to just get on and do do what they need to, and kind of removing any doubt or questioning around what's been modified between versions. If you're in the design collaboration, so most of our clients are activating the extended access program version of BIM 360 design, and the reason for that is it enables work sharing. So Revit work sharing means that multiple people can edit the Revit model at the same time, which works really well for your design teams, but equally there's a workflow that allows them to publish data to other design teams, and it's in real time to the data that's been shared. So that means that any data that you share with other design teams, they can consume and live link the shared version into their work in progress model. And you can do the same with theirs, which means that you're not having to wait for that kind of iteration process to happen and then package up all this data and create PDFs and then go through all that data. You get a notification that the structures team have released a new version of their project data. Do you want to review it? You go through it, change visualization, see what's changed, see what they've issued, consume it. And as soon as you do that, that replaces the previous version of their model, and that's already live linked into your Revit model. But what BIM 360 does is very, very clever, is that it'll aggregate all the models into a single view. So there's no one doing this. I haven't XREF'd all these models, live linked or linked these models together in Revit and publish them. You can see I've got 5 different teams highlighted on the left there. And what BIM 360 does is it coordinates and aggregates that model into a single view, which means I can switch off different different disciplines or different areas of the model. I can start to filter that, and what that allows me to do is see what each design team has produced and shared. Now that's really powerful because there's no need, like I said, to coordinate models elsewhere. It's BIM 360 is taking care of that for you automatically based on the excuse me, the data that's being shared by those design teams. Just 1 second. So that's really great for people who are not necessarily Revit users, but they want to get a view of the whole project, and they can see all of those discipline models all aggregated together. Very important. This is not clashing. It's not coordinating. It's just an aggregated view of all of those models together. This is really cool. I like this, especially for me. I mean, I come from drawing board background, so I'm used to the kind of the view on the right, but I love the kind of 3D model as well. And what this Hypermodel or minimap view is that you can see there's a little pointer, little person, if you like, represented by this dot in this little camera view, and they are showing in the 2D space, but equally you can see where you're looking in the 3D space. And that makes it really great to share that data with clients and people necessarily not using Revit and moving away from that 2D only kind of workflow where they can start to visualize the space in which they're creating and designing. So that's a really good way to kind of navigate side by side, drag and drop a pin on the 2D, and you're in 3D as well. So you can move that around, and as you move around in the one space, the other space kind of moves around in real time. Probably the most underrated function for me is the ability to create sets. So when you start using Revit work sharing and you enable, through BIM 360 design, you enable design collaboration, you start to get access to the design collaboration tab in Revit. And one of the things that enables is Revit sets. So what does that mean? It's not a work set. What does that really mean? If you think about when you're ready to share your model with someone else, what do you tend to do? You either create a copy of that, strip out all the elements that you don't want to share, clean it all up, and then publish that to, zip it up, create PDFs, whatever it is. You make it possible to share that in the version that you want to share. Typically removing stuff that's work in progress or not necessarily ready to be shared. That whole workflow is always taking an additional amount of time to create. What BIM 360 enables, and through that Revit collaboration tab, is you can create sets. So in the top, you can see that little kind of dialogue on the back on the left. You can name these sets anything you want. So, for example, you could just have the landscape and or ground level and below, and then just add any 3D views, 2D sections, 2D elevations, 2D plans, any schedules or anything associated with that ground floor and below to that set. Then when you're ready to publish it, and you can have any number of those sets, and all that does is it just takes just those elements and associates it with that set. When you're ready to publish that set, one of the options in the collaboration tab is to publish that set, and you can publish just that set to a relevant folder in BIM 360. So what that does is then takes all of those elements that have been predefined and just makes them available in BIM 360. And again, you can use that approvals workflow where you're getting your administrator to check that first and then publish it and distribute it to other members of the project. So that's a really, really effective way of managing data, because every time you add a new sheet, you just go, right, where is that sheet part of? Well, it could be part of the ground floor and below set, but it could also be part of another set. So you can just very easily build up all the sets that you want to publish, and as a result of that, just every time you're adding something new or modifying it, you just tick the little box and say that is part of that set. A really quick way of kind of managing the distribution of data with other people. Bear in mind that if you're using BIM 360, sharing a Revit sheet or a schedule is viewable in BIM 360, so you don't need to dumb that down to a PDF in order to share it with other people and for them to view it. So the purpose of sharing it as a Revit file just means that we're able to take advantage of things like the markup and the issue management and the approvals process, which then moves it somewhere else, and that's all built into BIM 360. Another thing that you can do is create a schedule. So what does that do? It just basically says on this day at this time, take this set and publish it to this folder. And you can do that automatically. So if you get confident with your teams and you're ready to instill that, it's a great way of if different teams are working on different disciplines within your organization, it's a really great way of just automatically making sure they've got the latest information, either daily, weekly, or whatever interval is preferred. So with BIM 360 Design, this is really cool. You get a project timeline. So this is from the start of the project right through the end. And it shows you every time one of the design teams has shared data or consumed it or made something available. And they're all, each team's color coded, and each symbol is represents what's been shared or what's been consumed. So you get a very visual timeline on who's published what or made what versions available when, and also who's using that data. So it's no longer a case of once it leaves my premises, I don't care, I've issued it, it's done. This is a really great way of keeping track of not only that you've issued something, but also who's using it. The little numbers that are over the dots, that's basically just showing you a zoomed out timeline, and there's a bit of an overlap in terms of data was issued a number of times in that small window that we've kind of zoomed right out to. So that's showing about a year's view, and there was probably data issued 2 or 3 times within a kind of a close proximity. So that's what that little number represents. But equally, if you've got a design team below that and they're all working on their own individual models or work sharing, it keeps track of when your design team also shared data. That's really useful to have when you're working from home. If you're saving your model to a server, you're just overwriting the model that's there. Nothing happens to it. It's a single file. I save it and it updates. And then if another person is also work sharing on the same model and they save it, it updates. But it's still only one file, and unless someone backs that up, it's just going to be one file. What happens in BIM 360 is whenever I sync with Central, that model becomes a version 2 or the next version up. And if someone else syncs with Central, that model becomes version 3. So we keep a full timeline of when that model was updated. That's not represented in this timeline, but we got that change management that I spoke about earlier. What this does is when we're ready to publish data to our teams, individual teams, or different Revit models to that central model, it's tracked in this little timeline that you can see there. So really, really good way of keeping a good track of what's happening with your project through a timeline, and everything is auditable. So I mentioned earlier about that timeline and also being able to explore content when it's shared with you. So in this case, we have a look at the architectural set that was published, and we can see that the set contains 25 sheets and 6 3D views. We can start to explore that. Exploring means that I can start to visually check all of those elements, or I can have a look at the previous version and do that change visualization when we're doing a model compare. Or kind of 2D compare. So that's a great kind of visual timeline. Once I consume it, it goes into a consumed folder, and that's automatically linked to my current work in progress model. So a great way of kind of just automating our process without having to do any other background work to make that possible. So I spoke about dashboards and analytics. With every issue that's raised, and if I assign an issue to someone else, I get to see the issue because I raised it, but also that issue appears on their personal dashboard. So when you log into BIM 360, there's a project home. You can click on that, and you can see all the tasks that are assigned to you. So all the issues that have been assigned to you, all the markups that you've raised, and so on. You can start to see that from an individual, so from a personal dashboard, but also from a project dashboard. You can see how many issues are still outstanding, how many have been raised, how many have been resolved, and you start to get some insights. And it's presented visually in a space like this, where you can see the project model. That's a full 3D interactive view of that model. It's not just a snapshot. And other project information. So a really great place to have very clear insights as to what's actually happening on a project that would otherwise be very difficult to try and get that information out. How many issues have been raised this week? Who are we waiting for? How many issues have not been responded to? It's all here. It's all on a dashboard, and you can get reports out of that as well. So a couple of other things, difficult to visualize some of this, but all of your project data is now in one place, and all of your different teams, whether they're just reviewing, whether they're working on Revit or AutoCAD, or if they're doing the work sharing, it's all in BIM 360. We put nothing on the server at this point. There was no need to put anything on the server. It's all just available in BIM 360 in project folders. Version control, this is not changing the name of the Revit file or the sheets. That's still the designer's job. What BIM 360 is going to do is it's going to go, right, I've had this file before, therefore this is a new version of that, and it becomes version 2, version 3, version 4, etc., until the file name is changed. Then it becomes version 1. And all that is really enabling you to do is that change visualization. So you get a full audit trail. It's only the latest file is on top. So I mentioned versions. That's version 7. It's the one on top. I can look at all the other ones, and I can invoke a previous version to be current. But you're always getting the latest file on top. I'm a big advocate of not dumbing down data to a PDF if I don't need to. Because as soon as you flatten it, you essentially lose a lot of information. Especially if you're using Revit as your modeler. There's a lot of object data and other parameters that you would otherwise want to be able to interrogate. And as soon as you put it in a PDF, you kind of lose that. And then transmittals happen by default almost, because people who have got access or subscribed to a folder, every time data is shared with that, if I share the data, I've got a timeline. I know when it was shared. If you've got access to that folder, I know you've got access to that data and you've been notified. So it's very very transparent. And I think that's what BIM 360 starts to enable, is that kind of transparency in that workflow. So just to really want to reiterate that BIM 360 does not create or edit or change file names or numbers. That's not its purpose. It'll receive the data and it'll understand what to do with it. But this is just summing up some of the stuff that I've spoken about. So really just wanted to kind of, so BIM 360 is kind of bigger than just somewhere to put your data and people to access it whilst they're working from home, potentially. And we had a lot of clients doing this, prior to the extended access program becoming available, where BIM 360 is being considered as a digital kind of a workflow management solution. So it's that part of that digital transformation, and BIM 360 is enabling that. So, it's been kind of thrust into the limelight, if you like. But I think the key thing for us, as personally, I'm a big advocate of BIM 360. I love what it enables. But for our customers and for you guys out there who are trying to deploy this EAP, I want you to think about, hang on, what about these workflows? If I'm not necessarily having to spend time cleaning up a model to share it, and I can just do that as I go, does that save me time? If I don't have to produce PDFs because I can view native files, does that save me time? What workflows is that replacing? And I would encourage you to think about that over and above what happens beyond this extended access program, beyond the end of May 31st. So big things to consider. So it's a very effective design collaboration solution, but also engaging the wider stakeholders in that project to interact with this data in a more kind of coherent way. So that's those are the kind of the main points that I wanted to get across in that. I just want to talk about. So the first thing I said I was going to do is just really give you a broader picture of what BIM 360 is enabling. Now I want to talk around this extended access program, and I'll start to address some of the questions I've had. I had some through email. Someone said they can't, they're having a login through through the YouTube, so that's fine. I've had some questions passed to me. That's not a problem. Please use the contact details if you want to ask any questions. Drop them there. We will answer them. But the extended access program, basically, Autodesk has made BIM 360 Docs and BIM 360 Design available for free until the end of May 31st. So we can show you the trial websites, and you can go on to just search for BIM 360 trial, and you'll get access to that data. And basically, any trial that you sign up for will expire in this current period at the end of May, so 31st of May. My recommendation is that you sign up for a BIM 360 design trial, because that also enables docs. And if you sign up for design, you then get the ability to try out some of these other workflows that I mentioned around timelines and around Revit work sharing, and being able to publish sets that I spoke about. That comes from that Revit collaboration tab. And if you enable a design trial, you just get one person to sign up, and then that person can add the other designers in your team. And enabling a design trial means that those other members of the team and the person who signed up could then be invited to collaborate in other BIM 360 environments, not just your own. Whereas if it's a docs trial, you can't do that. You would have to get someone else to invite you to that and then assign a license to you. And if that's a commercial version, not a trial version, then that starts to have an impact on cost. Whereas right now, if your design team has BIM 360 design, they'll be able to interact with data that's shared with them through someone else's BIM 360 hub. So that's the first thing, sign up for that. The challenge is, if you've signed up for a trial before, whether that's a collaboration for Revit trial or a BIM 360 trial of any type, you won't be able to use Revit work sharing. You'll be able to be added to a project if someone else signs up for that in your organization, but you won't be able to use Revit work sharing. So if you've signed up for a trial before, you can be invited to another trial site, but if that's a design trial and you want BIM 360 design trial and you want to enable Revit work sharing, that's not enabled at the moment. It's just Autodesk have not been able to kind of cleanse that history of activated trials. I understand why, because they don't do anything with their trials. There's no commercial side, so they don't. There's no one's monitoring the trials. Their trials are free, but obviously you're putting in an email address, and once that gets captured, it's now in this big pool of, well, you've run a trial before. So that's what you're up against there. So if you enable a trial, everyone's talking to me about, well, if it's free, why am I paying for someone to help me set it up? It's very important to understand that setting it up in the right way to enable all of these workflows is crucial. Don't just dump everything in one file. Make sure you're taking the time to understand exactly how to set up a project, enable the services on that project, enable people to access the bits that they should access, not everything. You can do a kind of a flat permission structure on everything, but again, you start to lose some of the power that BIM 360 enables with that. So please consider that. Think about how to set that up. There's lots of data available online. You can figure this out. Just go to, we've got a BIM 360 surgery. We snippet that, so we show little bite-sized bits of things that you can think about and set up. It's not the whole thing in one lump sum. You can just take bite-sized bit of information and just apply some of that as you go along. Right now, very sensitive to the fact that we've got a lot of people that potentially have time on their hands, or their companies would much rather invest in their own staff than invest in externals. I get that. We're sensitive to that as well. So if you've got that, please take the time. I encourage you to take the time just to understand BIM 360 is not going to be set up in half an hour. And if you have done it in half an hour, just please take the time to review what you've done, just to make sure you haven't kind of created any shortcuts that are really going to prevent you from taking advantage of some of this other functionality that I've spoken about. But the other key thing is try and identify any of those kind of workflows that are maybe long-winded or administration heavy, like producing PDFs. Design teams didn't go and kind of, architects and engineers didn't go to university for 6 years, get a qualification to come back and start producing PDFs. They want to design. So, if you don't need to produce PDFs, for what it's worth, you're better off just allowing them to do the design and just publish everything in BIM 360, because you can view it in there natively. You don't need to worry about file formats. So that's the stuff I'd encourage you to look at. One client that we went into, they did say that their design team's morale was an architectural practice, is heavily affected every time they have to spend hours producing PDFs, and no one likes to do it. Once we understood what they were doing and how they were working with it, there was no need. That literally went away. There was no need to produce PDFs unnecessarily for the majority of what they were using them for. So things like that, definitely consider. So bear this in mind. The Extended Access Program is available until the end of May. That is currently the deadline. Autodesk may change that, I'm not sure. But if they don't, you then have a window to consider. You have two options. Either you need to get your data off BIM 360, really easy, just download the whole folders and take everything down, drag and drop it, whatever's easier, just drag. You can install something called the desktop connector, which I would encourage that you do when you deploy this. And again, that's part of that workflow of getting it right first time. We do have services, lots of people do. I've got people that are available to help you if you need help. Just reach out to us. All our contact details are on the screen anyway, but reach out to your normal contact and we will be able to help you. But Desktop Connector is one of the things that you'll need if you want to get your data off BIM 360. And your administrator can then just quickly drag that onto your server and away you go. But again, bear in mind, once you're on the server, some of these workflows are now going to be a little bit more complicated or slower to achieve. The other option is to move to a commercial version, a paid-for version of BIM 360. If that's your desired route, please don't wait until the end of May, because I just want to stress, this is the whole world. Autodesk has made this available to everyone. And I'm not sure that there's an infrastructure that can support everyone kind of going, well, a lot of people trying to order at the same time, but at the last minute, and then trying to get a commercial site, their site converted from a trial to a commercial site. Just bear that in mind, put plans in place. If that is the path that you're going to go down, just allow a bit of a buffer. Come middle of May, just start deciding which way you want to go, and just please make sure that you're not kind of caught short and now no longer able to access your environment. If you are running a BIM 360 design trial or this Extended Access Program trial, if you do move that to a paid for, you will need to make sure that you're allowing a little extra time, probably more so than if you're just running docs, because you need to wait for that BIM 360 design license to appear in your Autodesk account. You then need to assign that to the designer or designers, want each license to a designer to enable them to continue to access your project data. If you don't take that step and do that, what will happen come the end of May, they will lose access. Even though you've paid for it, you still need to go into your Autodesk account and assign a license to each individual user. So you need to allow for some of that administration. So please just kind of bear those little things in mind. So one of the questions I got now was just, where is the trial? is it on a US or EU site? So the trial, this extended access program trial, is just available on the American site. So it's the US server. It is an Amazon web server, so it is a very secure server. There's lots of data available around that and the securities and protocols, and I won't go into that now because we'll need a whole another hour or then some. But it's available on the US server. So if you do start a project on BIM 360 now, your data's on a US server. What does that mean? It just means that that's where it's hosted, and that's where all the services are hosted from. You will know, and there's been some information around it, that there is also an EU server. I think, great, I'll have me some EU server as soon as I go for from this extended access program to a paid. No, it's not so simple. If you've already set up your BIM 360 on a US server on this trial, you can't just drag and drop it onto an EU trial in the EU server. So you would either have to download it and then create a new BIM 360 environment and then upload it to that. That would be one, or finish off the projects you've got on that and then initiate a new tenant on the EU server. There is some kind of administration that needs to happen. You'll need to get someone like us involved to make sure that happens. But you can't. Key thing here is you can't just drag and drop that data from one server onto the other. So please just bear that in mind because that's quite important. And if you've got sensitive projects that require the data to be in the EU, then you will need to think about moving that data, downloading it, moving it to an EU server. Please bear in mind, though, the only thing you're downloading is the data you've put up there. So any of the other functionality that BIM 360 offers, like if you've set up permissions and folders and your created approval workflows or any markups that have been created on any of those files, none of that's being downloaded. You're only getting the data you've put in there. You will need to reset that up on an EU server. So before you freak out, Autodesk made the EAP available before the EU server was available. It's only just become available. So that's it's just trying to help out. But like I said, I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. So key thing for this is if you're going to go into the EAP, or if you have done this extended access program for BIM 360, please don't just think of it as a as a storage. Think of it as a workhorse. Let it do all the heavy lifting. That's what it's designed for. It should be saving you hours and hours every week. If not, definitely every month, and it should more than pay for itself in terms of, if you're doing a kind of a value justification against your designer's time. So please, go into this with a considerate head in terms of it's not just it's free. Let's use that. Let's go. It's free. What advantages is this going to offer us? And how do we make the most of this to enable our design teams to effectively deliver projects from home? And again, my advice to you is think about how you can, sever the kind of link, the necessity to link to your Office server, because that will serve you today as it will in the future. So that would be a big kind of suggestion from me, is to make sure that that is one of your missions, if you like, is to make sure that you sever that link from from the server. So I just had another question come in about the limitation of people. It's unlimited. You can add any number of users to your trial. Again, like I said, unless they've run a trial before, if they're trying to do Revit work sharing and they've run a trial before, it's not going to happen. You are unfortunately going to have to think about a commercial version for that user. Not for everyone, just for that user that hasn't that has run a trial before. Someone says, what happens to my data at the end of it? Because you're copying it down, you're not deleting it, if you like. Basically, if your data is currently on an EAP, come the end of May, you decide, you know what, I'm not going to carry on, download it. After about 30 days, it just gets automatically deleted. So that, again, conversely to that, if you're going to go commercial and you want to pay for this because it's you see value in the platform, please consider try not to let it lapse and close, because one of the key things that Autodesk need and we need if we're gonna move your site from a trial to a paid for is we need the site ID. And each BIM 360 environment, it has its own ID, and once that's expired, if you no longer have access to it, we can't get that site ID. It just makes it a little bit, it's going to take a lot longer, let's say, to get that site enabled, because there's a lot of background work that needs to happen to try and identify which site it is. So please, again, try not to let that May 31st come and go without having made a decision which way you're going to go. And if you are going to go paid for, please just involve us, let us know what you're doing. We will give you the best advice. We'll make sure we capture all this information beforehand, including your users and so on, so that we can say, right, these are the steps you need to take to make sure that you're not losing any further time by unnecessary downtime because you can't access your environment. Someone said, what happens after the end of 31st of May? At the moment, we don't know. My feeling is that it will just go back to a 30-day trial, and if you start a trial on the 1st of June, it'll just expire in 30 days, and the same kind of end of trial rules apply. So that's it. It's just it's just gonna fade away, let's say, at the end of May, unless Autodesk extend that. We will see. Someone's just last email I've got was someone saying that the collaboration is that enabled for Civil 3D and Plant on the trial? Unfortunately not. It's only for Revit. So you can use BIM 360 design collaboration for Civil 3D and Plant 3D, but it's not available on the trial because it just wasn't enabled at the time. So you can't do that. So yeah, that's I have no more questions. I can't see any other questions coming in from the live. So hope that was useful. Like I said, this is being recorded, so it'll be published to YouTube. So if you've subscribed to our channel, you'll get a notification. If you subscribe to our surgeries, again, you'll get a notification, and we will share that with you. So hopefully that was useful. Please stay safe, look after yourself, do your bit for trying to keep a lid on things, and hopefully I've shared some insights that will help you get productive, get creative, and allow you to take advantage of BIM 360 as a platform to help you deliver projects more effectively. So that's all for me. I don't think there's any other questions coming in, so hopefully that was useful. Thank you very much.